What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline. And today we're going to be covering a gentleman named Tony Sayers. And the reason why we're covering him is because in my first ever live stream on Friday, Tony Sayers was recommended as somebody to potentially interview. And so I decided, since I wrote him down and people were speaking very highly of him, I decided to check out his YouTube channel and check out a little bit of content from him. And he's a very interesting guy, very big into, of course, the soul trapper. He likes to call it the soul trick theory. And I'd say, from what I've gathered thus far, and by the way, I'm very new to him. But what I've gathered thus far in this one video that I've watched is he's definitely a big proponent of soul sovereignty. This seems to be the foundation of what he tries to preach, or what he tries to the message that he tries to send to people loud and clear. Hey, you are in control. You are a sovereign soul. You do not need to look to any form of authority for help, whether it's a religious a deity, whether it's the source. No, you are in control. You are the one in power, but you have to recognize that. And if you don't, then you're giving away your power. This is what I'm seeing thus far. Very, very interesting guy. And in this one video that I've watched and kind of broken apart, I've extracted a couple of key excerpts that I think will give you a really good idea of what he's about and some of his main philosophies and ideas. So just to give you guys a quick summary of who Tony Sayers is first, and I'm definitely going to try and reach out to him and see if I can get him on the show as maybe one of my first ever interviewees. That'd be really cool. So Tony Sayers is an author, podcaster, and alternative spirituality commentator, best known for his platform Transcending Times, where he explores topics like the New Age deception, false light teachings, soul traps, entity attachments, chakra removal, artificial intelligence, and matrix control systems. He presents himself, as an activist and researcher who moved away from conventional life to question mainstream narratives and spiritual belief systems. Okay, very cool. Sayers has written books including Are You Living or Just Existing? I love that. Right? Like, we talk about that all the time for people who aren't asking some of these, not making it a priority to ask some of these deeper questions. Not excluding myself for a long time. I think the New Age is the new cage. I think he's talking about New Age spiritualism, artificial intelligence, energy vampires. I think we know what he's referring to there with Loosh, and plugged into porn. And he frequently appears on podcasts discussing spiritual sovereignty, right? Like I was mentioning, reincarnation trap theory. I think he'd prefer reincarnation trick theory, and metaphysical interference. So without further ado, let's get into the mix and let's go through these 4 different clips. And then I'm going to talk to you about what he mentions about Gnosticism. I didn't actually include a clip of his discussion of Gnosticism, but we're going to talk about it at the very end, because he also has some words of caution about Gnosticism, because it's something that many people have been championing lately, especially within this particular community of people who are trying to figure out what's going on, people who are into the idea of this potential soul trap or Loosh farm. And he cautions us not to go too deep into the Gnostic narrative, because he says, hey, there might be a little bit of manipulation in that narrative as well. That's hard to hear for me, because it is as though Gnosticism seems to be one of the few isms that seems to be guiding us correctly. So it's hard to think that might even be a potential manipulation, but it's food for thought, and I think it's worthwhile to think about. All right, so here we go. You see this question everything, and this is the beginning of the excerpts that I chose, and he's talking about the system of hierarchies that are built into life in this world, on this planet, and how that translates out of this planet into the astral, and how that basically leads to us getting tricked and trapped, so on and so forth.
And there's hierarchy within hierarchy. So within those institutions, there's, you have princes and princesses, then the queens, then the kings, and then you have MPs, politicians, the lords, and then you have the prime minister. So it's constant, like pyramids. And what happens is the people at the bottom automatically put these other people on pedestals because they're at the top. We automatically believe that they know what's best for us, or they can tell us what to do or how to live our lives. This is the whole authority, the illusion of authority. as I made other videos about that. And you know, the idea that authority even exists is crazy to me. You know, the fact that people actually believe that others can tell them what to do and how to live their lives is a ridiculous concept.
All right, so he's talking about the hierarchy, the hierarchical systems that we have in place on Earth, and he finds it quite ridiculous. And I would agree that a lot. I'll concede that point, that if you think about it, a lot of the authority that we inherently give to people placed in certain positions or given certain titles, it is a little bizarre, right? Because it just automatically takes away sometimes our power, especially when we're hearing things like all men are made equal and all women are made equal and all these types of things. It is a little bit bizarre, but then you also have to wonder how what would be the best way to run large societies without any sort of hierarchical structure or organization. And also in terms of control, like agreeing to certain laws and regulations to protect the safety of the masses or our own individual safeties. So I wonder if there's some sort of balance that needs to be struck when you have a large community. Or maybe that's the matrix infiltrating my mind. That's the mind virus telling me that, yeah, we need something, otherwise it'll be absolute chaos. Maybe that's not true. Maybe we could all survive communally without these types of major structures, and survive sort of almost like in a tribe type of way, where we each have our individual tribes or families, and we operate more independently. I don't know, but it is an interesting, I think, thing to ponder. If truly we would want to abolish the majority or all of these hierarchical systems, then like I can get behind saying that there's problems. Of course, there's tons of problems, and also too, I think part of the biggest problems is the people that are at the tops of these systems are morally bankrupt. And I think if that could be cleared up, a lot of these systems might function better. Maybe not so morally bankrupt people would choose to abolish the systems, right? But I guess what I'm curious to know is, I can get the complaints, but what's the solution? Like, how should the planet be run instead? I would just be curious to know. I'd love to, and maybe I'd love to ask Tony this question: is in addition to saying these structures need to be ripped down, well, what should be replacing them, if anything? Just questions that I'm sure I might have a lot of questions. Okay, so then he talks about these systems, but why? What's the, if they're not benefiting us, what's the purpose? And he says, all of these systems, similar to what David Icke says, all of these systems here and these hierarchies and this push to have us observe and respect authority leads to subservience in the astral.
When you look at what's going on in the astral, when people are having these experiences, NDEs and so on and so forth, it seems to be the same thing that's going on there. The people are dying, and there then presents these beings, this kind of hierarchy of maybe elders, robed beings. These entities will present themselves as deities, demigods, what have you. We know that, right? We know that's what's going on, right? They're not really those things. They're demonic reptilian shapeshifters, right? But already, because the human has lived in this world where there is hierarchy, where they're being told what to do, that others always know best, away from their sovereignty, let's call it that, not making their own decisions, letting their mind, their own consciousness being run by these parasites. They're not in control of their car, as I call it. Your consciousness is your car, and if you don't drive it, someone else will drive it. And so when these people pass over, because they've not done any work on themselves, and any work towards their own sovereignty, they just, they're easy prey, literal prey for these entities and beings to manipulate them and shoehorn them into coming back down. And this is why when I review these NDEs, so many of these people are just so pathetic with their pedalization of these beings. You know, they're automatic. They don't know them, right? They think they may have known them somewhere. Sometimes they say that, but they don't know these beings, and automatically, because they put on a bit of a show, they're already up there and they're already down there. You know best. You know what's best for me. I'm just little me. I'm just a human. I'm just you know, Susan that worked in the flower shop for 30 years.
I have a couple questions, and there's a lot of what he's saying that overlaps with things that Jason Georgiani says, the things that David Icke says, in terms of we need to do the work so that we aren't manipulated, we aren't putting these entities on a pedestal, and we can see through maybe the BS. And then, but my next question would be, how do we do the work? So, for example, Jason Georgiani outlines this 5-step methodology in Thenosis of how you can kind of strengthen your mind and enhance your awareness. And he prescribes a multitude of things. I mean, one of the things is actually, I think, using DMT to some extent. Another one he talks about is becoming familiar with like symbols and understanding how to use symbols and read symbols, things like that. So he lists out these different ways to strengthen your mind. I think he talks about meditation as well, and basically getting more in touch with yourself that way. So I'd be very curious to know from Tony Sayers' perspective. And I think like the way David Icke says it is very simply just gaining this higher level of awareness. And then once you have this level of awareness, you can't be manipulated. But I'd love to know in practical terms, what is Tony Sayers' thought on that? So he's saying we have to do the work. Like, what is that work in his estimation? Is it can't just be us waking up now. I'm guessing it can't just be this, or maybe it is. I don't know. But is there much more to do? The reason why I say it can't be, it could be, but I guess then we see people go to such great depths and lengths and extents to meditate hours and upon hours a day to get in touch with themselves, to do these really extreme processes. You see monks go out to these remote areas and just sit with themselves and meditate. Like, there's got to be something to that. That's why I think maybe there's more work for us regular people to do than just simply being aware, and that truly becoming comfortable in confident in ourselves and in our spiritual sovereignty must require some really deep work, because I just have a feeling that even if we feel confident now, maybe that's not going to hold up once we get to the astral, once we're really face to face with some of these entities or some of these deceptions. Just a theory. It could be wrong about that. This could be enough. And but anyways, I'd love to hear more about Tony Sayers and what he says on that front. Yeah, and when he mentions this idea of you just go there and you just immediately accept what these entities are saying, he kind of calls it pathetic. But I mean, I get that. But what are we? I think the place that we're all coming from, I mean, me included, prior to learning about this stuff, is all the BS stops once you die. I mean, that's kind of what I always thought. You're just going to immediately know the truth. I don't know why I exactly thought that, maybe partially from religious influences or whatnot, but I thought whatever games or nonsense were going down out here, it stops. So the fact that that's why this has been such a jarring experience to learn all of this stuff, to think that, wait a minute, so many people are saying that the manipulation continues on into the astral and then back into life and then the astral. And it's like, wait a minute, we have to actually be careful of people deceiving us out. I mean, yeah, sure, we get it in here, but out there too, it's pretty wild. So of course you go into those experiences and you see things, you're just, I think, normally likely to just believe everything that you're going to experience or encounter, unless you know otherwise. So it's just, I get it why people feel that way. But yeah, again, the way around it, or the way to rise above it, I think, as Tony is saying, is to do the work and embody your sovereignty now. So this is just like such a powerful message. That's why I have it on the thumbnail. I love this. Check this out.
So that's why it's important, again, just to repeat the point, to embody your sovereignty now, become your own leader. And so when that time comes, hopefully you don't ever meet any of these entities, these masquerading entities. Hopefully you don't get that far, but you're in your power, right? It's a very subtle difference, but it's very powerful.
And that's, I think, his point is do the work, like he's saying, build that notion of sovereignty right now, right here, so that it translates and carries over with you when you get to the other side. And that way you can sort of pass the test, if you will. Not pass, not like it's a test, but you know what I'm saying? You can stand up to whatever deceptions are being thrown your way, whatever manipulations are being launched at you via life reviews or otherwise. Or maybe they won't even have you take a life review if they can see that, nah, you know what's up. You're not gonna be fooled. You're not gonna be manipulated. And so I love that. And that's, I think, what he's talking about, doing the work here, embodying your sovereignty now. And is there a blueprint to this process of embodying your sovereignty? Or is it just as simple as recognize what's going on, embrace your power, understand that you are in control? And that's that. Okay. Last clip here, and then we're going to talk about his thoughts on Gnosticism. This is him talking about the problem that most of us have, the problem that most of us face in this life, is that we pass on or we die without escaping this hierarchical system or mindset, and having this slave mentality when we go on into the astral. Check this out.
Whereas, like, the top of the capstone, you would say, would be God. God, or whatever deity the person believes in, Muhammad, or Buddha, whatever, right? So that would present itself at the top of the hierarchy. And so, of course, when the capstone presents itself, there's no question, right? There's no arguments, because it's the capstone, right? It's the top of the pyramid. It's the head honcho. It's the big cheese, like whatever you want to call it. And so, and that's how these people are being manipulated time and time again, because of this hierarchical system that exists outside this physical realm into the astral realm. And because they're not embodied any part of their sovereign essence, it's completely not even discovered, right? Slave mentality. So people are dying with the slave mentality, that they can be told what to do, or that kind of thing.
It's crazy when he puts it like that, passing out with the slave mentality. But moreover, when he talks about religions and when he talks about this idea of authority, that's probably why so many religions, well, how do I put it? I think that's probably why, let's say I was talking about this idea before. We have this idea of religious freedom being something that's a beautiful thing. And in some ways it is beautiful. We don't want religious persecution, right? But the idea of religious freedom, and hey, like, I'm going to respect your religious beliefs and we're not going to challenge it. And we're going to let everybody have their own opinions and belief systems, and we're going to all live together and cohabitate. That's beautiful. But the problem with it is it keeps everyone in a bubble. And ultimately, there probably is one, just like there's one scientific truth for material sciences of how things work and the laws of physics and matter. It's not like I'm going to operate that by the fact that you heat up an ice cube and it gets colder, or something, something bananas like that, right? We must all live by these universal laws of science because they are the laws, they are the rules, they are how things work and operate. And I would argue the same thing goes for the afterlife. And because it is another realm. It's, again, really a scientific question of what happens when we pass on from these lives. And so it's something that we should not be answering or in isolation, or something that should be a closed loop, that we say, okay, well, it's this particular a book tells us everything, and we're not going to explore beyond that. Even though there's issues with it, or there's different contradictions, we're just going to say, nope, this is our bubble and we're going to stay in it. You got to respect that. That keeps us stuck in these bubbles and not advancing the subject forward, and not thinking more, and not trying to get to a communal answer that resonates and makes sense with everybody. And that keeps us stuck in the mud. And why would that be so beneficial? Well, if you think about it from Tony Sayers' perspective, I mean, obviously, number one, it keeps us from maybe discovering the true nature of reality. But number two, from pretty much all of these religions, you have some sort of authority figure built in to the paradigm, whether it's Jesus in Christianity, or whatever the religion may be. There is some or multiple religious figures, whether they are saints or whether they are prophets or whatever it may be, or God himself or herself. You have all of these figureheads built in, and if you think about it with respect to the soul trick and the manipulation, the life review, and then convincing people to go back, right? You could say one thing about looking up to the prime minister or the president or the king or the queen, but then if you truly have this diehard faith, let's say in Jesus being your savior, and then you and however you imagine him looking or however you imagine him being, you go up and you're just given this amazing presentation right when you die that is Jesus, that is the one. He's right there, just like you expected, just like you predicted your whole life. Oh my God, I believed it so much, and then right there he's there, dude. You're gonna do anything, and that's the idea. And he calls it a slave mentality. It's well, yeah, I guess you could say that, but that it's just that idea of absolute faith, which I know it's almost hard to say, is because I know having these faith or becoming a born again Christian or whatever has helped so many people find a path in life or find some structure in life and get out of negative situations. But if what he's saying is true, which I'm inclined at this current time to think there's a lot of truth to what he's saying, man, as much as it can be a hand to lift you out, it's also a handcuff to keep you trapped into whatever is going to be told to you in the astral plane, because you're believing that so much. All these entities have to do is generate an image or shapeshift into that entity, and anything they say is going to be, you're going to take it hook, line, sinker for sure. Not to blame you for it, but that's what's being programmed into us. My point is that could be the twofold reason why all these religions are just like, this is perfect. We want this in the system 100%. Number one, keeps people from really pursuing the truth. But number two, it doesn't matter what you believe, because any one of those figures or representatives can be conjured up for you at that moment of passing into the astral. And then boom, you can be convinced or manipulated to do whatever to re-enter the system. Whatever they want, you will concede. Wild, very, very, very interesting way to think about religion. Now we get to the final section, Tony's thoughts on Gnosticism. I didn't include a clip here, but I just thought I'd summarize effectively what he said, because his whole central point is we need to embody our own sovereignty. We need to really be confident in ourselves that we are the ones in control. We have the power. And we don't need to be saved. We don't need an authority figure to look up to. And while Gnosticism seems to be such a breath of fresh air from all the other isms, from all the other religions, because it really flips most of these religious ideas on its head. And then also, I think people are kind of curious about Gnosticism too, because it was destroyed. Why was it destroyed? Why was it so controversial? Why did they burn all the books? Why did they run them out as heretics? And then these books were discovered. Like, why? Like, that's a little suspicious, right? So a lot of people latch on to Gnosticism and say, okay, it must have been destroyed for a reason. We think actually these guys were on the right track to really understanding what was going on. Plus it merges with a lot of these ideas of being trapped in this reality of being fed upon, and ultimately kind of having a backwards deity that is managing this whole system, which seems to fall in line with what a lot of people are saying via the soul trap theory. But one thing that Tony says as he gives caution is like, but there's still some little bit of hierarchical system within the Gnostic paradigm in terms of source and the Pleroma. And I'm not sure I totally agree with him, but I do think it's food for thought. It's interesting because I need to learn a lot more about Gnosticism and the Gnostic ideals and traditions. But in general, what he's saying is, I think, hey, we shouldn't be looking to any place to go, anybody to go to, any entity to merge with. We are sovereign souls, sovereign entities, and we ourselves have the power. We don't need any place or anything or anyone. And so he's cautioning people not to get too deep into saying, okay, Gnosticism is the pure truth. That's it. That's everything. Because of that one little piece that he feels as though is a bit still hierarchical, may still be some bit of a trap. Now, I'm not so sure, because I don't think just because there's a realm outside of this realm that is called the Pleroma that we are trying to basically escape this trap and go there, that necessarily implies any sort of a hierarchy. I mean, that's just really a two-part system. We're in one part, and the aim is to escape this part to return to where we're truly from, the Pleroma. That's the way that I look at it. So I don't necessarily look at it as this hierarchical system or us having to look to an authority. It's just returning home. But interesting perspective from Tony Sayers. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts in the comments. What do you think? Do you think his words of wisdom, his words of caution in regards to not even diving too into Gnosticism, his words are warranted, or do you think also maybe that's a bridge too far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But this was really cool. I want to thank everybody for coming on these lives. In the last 2 lives, I had to do a shortened one today because I mixed up an appointment. I was planning to do an hour and 15 minutes, ended up only being like 20 minutes or 25 minutes, something like that. And then we did a really long one on Friday. I'm going to do another one this Friday, but it was so cool. That's how I learned about Tony Sayers. So I got all this great information. Please join me again when I do my next live stream. It was so much fun, and it was incredible connecting with everybody who's on for along for the journey right now and along for the ride. It was amazing. But anyways, that's all I got on Tony Sayers. Let me know your thoughts. Is this somebody that you would like me to interview? Should I try? Because I'm going to try anyways, but I have a whole list of people. If this is at the top of your list, please let me know in the comment section. I'm going to try and reach out ASAP. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.